I've been in sales since I was 18 years old. I've generated over $300 million in revenue across over 150 companies. My sales team has scaled 8 businesses to $1 million a month plus. And in this video, I'm covering 13 brutal truths that I wish I was told when I was just getting started. Nobody skips a call for a problem that's keeping them up at night. This is where so many people go wrong. I've seen salespeople and companies change their automations, change their reminders, change every little text message under the sun to try to improve their sales call show up rate. The truth is, you can change them, you can change the timing, you can get to people faster. And while yes, those things can help, the most important thing and the thing that's going to move the needle the most is by solving a big enough problem and by the packaging around that problem before the prospect schedules the call in the first place. If they're simply scheduling a sales call to help them get more leads for their business, that's good. They might show up to that. That might be a big enough thing that they want to solve. But if they're scheduling a sales call that is going to help them get leads so that they can make their first $1 million in business, now you're solving a much more real problem for the prospect. Too many people and their businesses on their landing page and in their ads, they're way too direct about what they're providing, and they're not connecting the puzzle pieces for the prospect on what the outcome is actually going to look and feel like for them when your product delivers it. So if you're having a low show up rate, go back to your ads, go back to your landing page and ask yourself, truly ask yourself, if I'm a prospect and this is my first time seeing this ad in this company, I have no idea who you guys are, is this enough of a problem, and do I believe it enough that I'm 100% likely to show up to this call engaged and excited to learn more? And if it's not, and remove your biases, remove everything you know about your own business, and if it's not, then ask yourself, well, what needs to change? Normally, the answer is that you just need to start selling the destination, not the trip, not the flight. You need to start selling on the landing page and on the ads. What is the outcome that they're going to get as a result of working with you? And what is that transformation going to create for them? Not what you're going to give them. Not that you're going to give them leads or you're going to give them content or you're going to give them sales. What is the outcome that it's going to create? So if my business, which we do this, we help scale companies, we build sales teams, we build operating systems. My business, I help you get to salespeople. If you go look at our ads, the big thing that we're talking about in our ads is not, hey, we're going to help you get 1 or 2 salespeople to sell your product. We're not saying that. In our ads, we're saying, hey, we're going to scale your business so that you don't have to be the only person in your company that can actually sell your service. And that's just an example, but the reality is that's a big pain point for a lot of these prospects. They're the only person in their company who can sell, and that keeps them up at night. And we're saying we're going to solve that for you. We're not saying, hey, I'm going to get you 1 closer. I'm going to get you 1 salesperson who's going to solve your sales problem. That's not it. Some people will believe you, but most people will believe themselves. What do I mean by that? So many salespeople on your calls, especially when you're just getting started, you tell people what to think way too much. But you're on the call and you're telling them that XYZ solution is important, right? That saving money on taxes is important, or starting that business is important. Whatever you're selling on your sales calls, you're telling that person that these things are important or that they should believe in XYZ things. The truth is if you frame your questions in a way that prompts the prospects to start telling you these things themselves, you will get far, far, far better results, right? Versus one example. I'll give you a really clear-cut example, right? A lot of people get the wife objection, right? You get the wife or the husband objection at the end of the sales call. Hey, I need to talk to my wife or husband. I can't do this right now, right? A lot of people get that. And then they try handling that head on. Rarely ever works. So what a lot of people started doing is they started asking at the beginning of the call is, well, hey, is there any other decision makers that should be on this call, right? They're probably going to say no. That never works. Like when you start asking a prospect, hey, are there any other decision makers that should be on this call? They're immediately going to get, they're immediately going to get commission breath, and they're not going to want to buy from you, or probably not even going to want to stay on the call. They'll just lie to you. They'll go through the process, get the price, and get off. So you never want to do that. But what you want to do instead is you want them to vocalize back to you that they don't need their wife on the call. You want them to vocalize back to you that their wife is really supportive of them, and actually they're a team and they get to do this together, and they get to cheer cheering fan in their corner. So how do you do that? You just start by asking, well, hey, how does your wife feel about all this, by the way? And again, depending what your product is selling, if it's like a really B2B sense, then you're obviously not going to do this. You probably don't get wife, you probably get business partner, right? So then you want to flip it to just business partner. But let's say it's B2C, it's some sort of, product or service that helps people, build a business, for example. So how does your wife feel about all this, by the way? Is she excited? Is she nervous? Is she on board? Or is she like not really a fan of it, right? So first thing I did was when I asked him the question in a very natural way, right? By the way, I wasn't too head on about it. And then I gave him two options. I'm like, is she excited, nervous? And I'm upward inflection on the option that I wanted to choose. And then the downward inflection on the ones that I don't want to choose. Not downward inflection, but more I'm compressing it. Or is she just not really on board, right? So I kind of say it as an aside. So he's less likely to select that one. He's more likely to believe that his wife, is on board. So he's going to tell me, no, she's on board. We talk about it all the time. Now I've got one of two options. I could just ask him, well, hey, do you want to have her jump in and join the call? Which is obviously you can do that, but for the point of this talking point, we'll do it a little bit differently. The other option I could do is like, wow, I love that. You'd be surprised how many people I talk to where, their wife isn't really on board and they have to do it anyways. And a lot of them still get results and they do really, really well. But you can imagine it's much easier when you have a strong partner supporting you, right? Now they're going to answer back, yes, you're right. 100%. I'm so grateful for my wife for supporting me. And then I'm going to ask them one more time, how do you guys think you cultivated that? I'm just curious. And now he's going to go into explaining even one step further, right? So now he's just spent minutes telling me that his wife is supporting him, that they're in this together, that he's got a fan in his corner or a support person in his corner that isn't going to hold him back. Unlike so many other people who don't get results, so many other people who aren't my ideal buyer. So now when we get to the objection handling, when we get to the close, the likelihood of him surfacing his wife as a problem becomes much, much, much smaller. And that's a key point here that I want everyone to understand. So you can do this in a lot of different ways. Ask yourself in the call, in your current process, if you have a script, you should. If you have a flow chart, that's fine. Ask yourself, where can I ask questions to prompt responses where the prospect can tell me these things themselves, where they can tell me that they are the ideal buyer? And what does that look like? And how do I ask those questions? And then start working them into your script. This is a perfect example of one. There are obviously hundreds and hundreds of more. A really good example of what not to do here, and when I say you're asking questions or you're telling the prospects what to think, is so many salespeople will do this. They'll ask a question like, you think this is important, right? I need to think about it is not a real objection. It is a discovery phase issue. This is a hill that I will die on until the end of time. I need to think about it is not an objection. It should never be an objection. It should never be in a script of objection handles. If I see one more sales coach that comes on and says, here's how to handle, I need to think about it. It's not something you should ever have to handle. If you approach the discovery phase properly, I need to think about it does not become a real problem. It is almost always 99.9% of the time a simple deflection that the prospect is using because they don't know what else to say and they're not sold and they don't want to buy your thing yet or at all. That's it. That's really what it is 99% of the time. You didn't do something in the discovery phase to get them to want to buy at the end of the call. They don't actually want to think about it. That's just not true. Like when you think back to yourself, when you really want to do something and you're really sold on something, you don't need to think about it. And if they tell you I need to think about it and you try handling it head on, obviously you have to because you're a salesperson, you need to get it closed. But you're losing so much time by practicing how to handle that head on instead of learning how to deflect it and how to remove it before they give it to you, right? It's like if you spend all your time like learning how to sew stab wounds and you're like, I got to really learn how to sew this stab wound so that when I get stabbed, I'll know how to protect myself versus just like not walking down dark alleyways, in the middle of the night to begin with. You'll probably not get stabbed if you just avoid those alleyways altogether. And then you won't need to, know how to sew stab wounds. So if you find you're getting, I need to think about it a lot on your calls, I'll give you one way to prevent that from happening earlier on in the call that you can start using as of today. So what I do when I'm getting, I need to think about it, how I fix that is I try to create urgency within my prospect earlier in the call, right? So picture this, you've got an ideal buyer, right? Like you've got a guy, you guys probably have someone you speak to that when you speak to this kind of prospect, like they're closing 10 times out of 10, right? So you've got that person person in your head. They're probably urgent. They probably have money. They probably have the support of their spouse. They probably have a problem big enough that they're willing to pay for it. They probably have a goal that they're chasing that's big enough that they're willing to pay for it and commit. All of these things, right? The key here is that you can turn anybody into those things. You can turn most prospects, not every, you're not going to close 100% of the people. You can get pretty close, but you can turn everybody into becoming that mold, that kind of person. That's why I think it's really, really important that if you're a salesperson, you should write down your ideal person. What do they say? What do they talk about? What do they look like? How do they feel? How much money do they have? You should write down that ideal person and then write down like 100 questions to get someone to turn into that person. Like ask people questions in a way that the only way for them to answer those questions is for them to become that identity, for them to become that ideal buyer. But anyways, I'm getting a little bit off topic. So I need to think about it. So the way I do that is I'm usually handling some form of urgency, and I'm creating urgency within the prospect, right? So I'm helping them step into the identity that they have urgency as an individual towards their goals. So I'll come down from I know that's really high level. I'll come down from it now. What does that mean? What does that actually look like? I might ask them early on in the discovery phase, hey, out of curiosity, what made you want to do this today? Just in a really curious inflection. I'm not challenging them. It's an open-ended what question, right? I'm not going to say, why do you want to do this today? Why is too head on. It creates resistance. Like Chris Voss talks about that all the time. When you're asking open-ended questions, you typically want to avoid why at the start of them. But what is really, really inviting? Hey, out of curiosity, and I love framing with out of curiosity, what made you want to do this today? And then let's say they answer. The cool thing is the only way for them to answer that question is to inherently and subconsciously agree that they want to do this today. They might have gotten on that call having no actual intention of doing this today. They might have jumped on the call being like, well, I'm just a tire kicker. I want to do this in a month from now, 3 months from now. You'll be surprised. A lot of people will put on their application. If you've got a time question on your application, when do you want to start? They'll put 3 months, 1 month. You'd be surprised. You ask this question 9 times out of 10, and I'm not joking, 9 times out of 10, they will answer it fully as if they want to do this today. And then what happens? They start to align with that identity. They start to agree that they want to do it today. And then they're going to answer it. Well, I want to do this today because I've been looking at this for the last year and I saw your ads. And yeah, it just made sense. And I clicked the ad, right? They might give you not much. They might give you a lot. That's okay. Then you dive in a little bit deeper. Oh, you've been looking at this for a year. That makes a lot of sense. Now, depending on how they answer this, you might have to go a level deeper, or you can just label it right from the get-go. So if you have to go a level deeper, then I might ask like something like, well, how long have you been looking at this, right? So if I say what made you do this today? And they give me some really surface like, oh, I just saw an ad and I was kind of curious. You'll get that a lot. Oh, okay, that makes sense. How long have you been like looking at a solution like this, right? Again, really curious tone. Like you're opening the door and you're just you want them to kind of walk in and see what's inside the room. You don't want to jump at them with these kinds of questions. You need to invite them forward with your tonality. Just, and that makes a lot of sense. I guess how long have you been looking at doing something like this, right? Whatever your solution is, you might want to loop it into the question. Now, let's say they say, oh, I've been looking at this for a couple of years. Whenever they say the how long, now you always want to have a little bit of an upward inflection. Or, 2 years. I mean, you've probably realized 2 years goes by like that. But was it really just the ad that kind of made you feel like you wanted to do this now? Or is there something else that's really made you want to take this step forward, right? So you're rephrasing the question. Again, you're looping in the time and then you're rephrasing the question in a way that the only way for them to answer is to agree that they want to do it now, right? If they give you something really good right out the gate, or they answer that next one, then what I like to do is I like to do a label, and I like to label them as somebody who has urgency, right? And this is a really easy thing to do. A lot of people think that you can only label the things that people say, but you can actually label people's character, and you can label people's future character, who they want to become, but you can also label who you want them to become, right? Your prospect, I say this all the time, your prospect can be anyone as long as you label them to become that person. They can be anyone you fit them into, right? So they answer my question, they tell me why now, or they tell me how long, and then I rephrase it, they tell me why now again, and then I just might label it really, really simply. I mean, hey, I love that you've recognized that. It sounds like you've really just realized that the only way for you to start taking steps towards these XYZ goals is to just jump in both feet forward, right? Or in the other example, if they've told me that they've been looking at this for 2 years and they finally decided to just take a step forward, I mean, listen, it sounds like you've recognized, and I love labeling with you've recognized, you've realized. Those are really powerful internal words that people can align with. I call them epiphany labels. So it's like they've had this epiphany, this moment where they've realized this next thing that they have to do. It's really powerful when you use it on your sales calls with that tonality. It sounds like you've realized that 2 years went by like that, and another another 10, another 15 years can go by with you just sitting on this before, you're 60, you're 65, and you still haven't accomplished what you said you always wanted to do, right? And then when you use a label in that way, and if you don't know what a label is, I recommend you go read this book, Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss. It is one of the best sales books out there of all time ever. I'll probably do a whole other video just on that book. He talks about labeling in depth. I didn't invent this shit. I just learned it. I stole it from somebody and then I use it as most of the stuff on this channel, if we're all just being real. So when you label them in that way and you use that epiphany label and you say, it sounds like, you've realized, use these heavy words, they align with it. They're like, yes. And a lot of the times you'll hear people like almost say a sigh of relief, like, yes, you get it. Like, you understand me. And it feels like they're taking off like a 40-pound backpack. And when you do that, you will be surprised at how little I need to think about it you'll get at the end of your sales call. You will get so much fewer I need to think about it because you've helped them step into the role of somebody who has urgency. You've helped them step into the identity of your ideal buyer, and your ideal buyer does not need to think about it. So that's one example. There's 100 different ways you can do that. You just need to ask yourself and think about, they're telling me I need to think about it. Why are they doing that? What traits are causing them, or what lack of traits are causing them to give you that objection? And then how do I shift that before I pitch the product, before I give the price? How do I shift that and help them step into the opposite version of that? If you aren't willing to do it, I guarantee that somebody else is. What do I mean by that? If you're a closer, an appointment setter, a salesperson, even a business owner, and you're watching this right now, and there's something that you know that you could start doing to help you make more money, close more sales, or be more successful in this vehicle, and you're not willing to do it, I guarantee you that it is only a matter of time before the next person comes in and they are willing to do it, and they far surpass you as a result. So I'll give you a really good example of this within our industry, or I guess our older industry, which was high ticket sales, like the info product coaching sales, right? So for the longest time in this industry, really, there was really only closers, right? Like there was this new role called high ticket closer that Dan Locke was always talking about and all these people were talking about. And it was great. You're making 15 to 20% commissions to just sit on Zoom calls and close deals. Then a couple years goes by, there's a lot more closers that flood the industry. And then all of a sudden there's people that are willing to do it for 10%, right? They don't want to do it for 20. They want to get on better offers. They want to get on better products to sell. So they're like, hey, I don't need 20%. I don't need 15%. I'll do it for 10, right? And now the industry standard is 10%, right? Then people started to realize, well, hey, I'm not good enough to close yet and compete with all these closers, but I'm willing to just call all the leads and set appointments. And then appointment setters were born and they were called appointment setters. And obviously these are all other real roles in other sales industries. I'm not pretending like these are new roles by any stretch, but it's kind of how the industry developed for coaching, right? And it's how it's happened in every sales industry ever. It always starts really, really good. The salespeople are really crushing it. They're getting paid they're getting paid a lot. Same thing in insurance. Back in the day, people didn't have to buy their own leads. They were given leads by the organization. Then the next guy came in and said, hey, I'll bring my own leads. I'm buying these leads from a list. Give me the opportunity over this next guy. And they did, and it worked. So there's always going to be, especially in a new industry, there's always going to be somebody that's going to come in and is going to do it for cheaper, going to do it for less, or is going to do more of it. And so if you're watching this and you're a salesperson, start to ask yourself, well, what is that next thing? The reality is, if you're a closer watching this right now, and you're not willing to do outbound dials, and you're not willing to set appointments for yourself, and you're not even willing to generate your own opportunity without any inbound opportunity, you will severely fall behind. You're already hearing a lot of people talk about this. You're already hearing a lot of content creators talk about this, sales coaches talk about this, that the new kind of meta or the new form is going to be full cycle closers. We've been doing this at Net Revenue for almost 2 years already. We've had full cycle closers for the last 2.5 years, and we've believed this for a long time. It's one of the reasons we started really shrinking our SDR division as a company. We shrunk our SDR division from almost 150 appointment setters to now down to about 30 appointment setters. Why? Because we started to realize I could get really, really good and competent salespeople who are going to be this first touch for the lead, and I could have them set their own appointments for 12% commission instead of the 5 for a setter plus 10 for the closer. Have them set their own appointments and just create this full cycle role. And there's people that are really skilled that were willing to do that. And those people, to me, are 10 times more valuable than the closer, even if they're a better closer who can only do Zoom calls inbound and won't do outbound. The next level is eventually there are going to be closers who come to the table that are not just full cycle, but they also generate their leads. There's going to be closers, and if you're watching this and you're a closer and you want to make more money, this is probably a pretty good idea for you to start doing is, well, hey, I've got AI, I've got tools like Apify, I've got tools that can scrape leads. Why don't I go scrape 5,000 leads, 10,000 leads, text them, email them, call them, and generate my own leads? And then go to the business owner and say, well, hey, I should be getting paid 30% for this. These are my own leads that I've generated. You're going to be way more valuable than the next guy, right? Or you actually probably see this a lot. A lot of salespeople now are building brands, right? They're building brands around the thing that they're selling. That's another really, really strong example to get your own leads. There's one of Jeremy, I forget his name, one of Jeremy Miner's sales reps has his own brand, and he's got a really, really big brand, and he sells Jeremy Miner stuff. He's his top closer for who knows how long. I'm sure he's got a higher commission rate on those leads that he generates himself than the rest of the team, right? So if you're not willing to do it, somebody else will. They're going to take your lunch. So start to think about, well, how can I make myself more valuable as a salesperson outside of just closing at 10% on book calls? Because if you're just sitting there taking book calls inbound, you don't do any outbound, and you're closing at 10 to 15% on book calls, you can be replaced with a link on a website. The business owner that hired you is just probably a little too dumb to realize it. That's just the truth. But if you're closing at 10% on book calls, or you're hitting $100 a day, you're scheduling a bunch of appointments that didn't schedule without you, then that's a completely different story. So what do I mean by this? This might sound a little obvious to some of you, it might sound easy to understand to a lot of you, but so many people get this wrong. You have a call script, you have a flow, whatever you're following to do your calls right now. And it's not even just about the script, but more so your approach, your tonality, the kinds of questions you're asking and how you're asking them. When you have a more affluential prospect on the line versus a prospect who is like making ends meet, it's very B2C, it's very just a simple solution for them to hit XYZ simple goal, you're going to sell to that person very differently than you do the affluent prospect who's, a multimillionaire who's accomplished their baseline human needs. When someone's accomplished their baseline needs, they're no longer in this fight or flight where they're constantly running from something that you can create and make it really big and make it really scary so that they want to take this leap, right? When someone's accomplished those baseline needs, you now have to paint the picture for what they're running towards and make that bigger and make it easier and make it cheaper and faster for them to get there. I'll give you a really good example of this. One of our salespersons, one of our closers, just last month closed an actual billionaire on the products that he was selling. So he sells for a content agency. They do automated content for people. They help brands and individuals just grow their personal brands. He gets an actual billionaire on the sales call. The guy's worth about 4-point-something billion, made it through private equity, businesses, XYZ. Our closer gets him on the call. He'd done a little bit of research prior. He knew he was very successful. He knew that he had XYZ results in business. So he came prepared for that call. Now, if he handled that call the same way that he handled his call an hour earlier, which was with a restaurant owner who owned a sushi restaurant that was barely able to make ends meet and needed to do content to save his business, if he approached it the same way as he approached it for the literal billionaire who has everything he could realistically want that material money can buy, then he would have lost the call 10 times out of 10. If he started jumping on that call and being like, what's your why? Why is this important to you now? And he starts doing these kinds of downward inflection and these really hard-hitting personal questions, he would have lost the sale. The reality is when you get prospects on the phone, they're either running towards something or they're running away from something. Your job as a salesperson is to either make the thing they're running away from scarier and bigger and closer to them, or the thing they're running towards bigger and help them get there faster and cheaper, or increase their perceived likeliness of getting there. That's your job. When you've got someone who's very successful, you're on the latter end of that. They've got something they're running towards. They're probably not running away from something unless you're selling like a very kind of personal oriented product, like fitness is a really good example, or like a dating, if there's some dating offers that exist, right? If you're talking to a billionaire, but you're selling like a service to help someone find their wife, then yes, you're helping them run away from like loneliness at a certain extent. And that can be a very emotionally charged call. But for the most part, you're helping them run towards something. And so this guy, he's got his business, he's got his next goals in business that he wants to accomplish. And he's recognized that he can't really accomplish it without having some level of attention in media. Right? So my closer, his job and his only job is to help them bridge that gap, is to help them understand that, hey, we can help you do this faster, easier, and cheaper than the next guy or than you doing it yourself. And that's exactly what he did. It wasn't a very emotionally charged call at all. It was very straightforward. He helped him understand that. He made the goal even bigger and he made it easier to get to. And sure enough, the guy closed for, I think it was a $36,000 paid in full annual contract. Nobody can argue against their own numbers. So when you're doing especially B2B sales, when you're doing but any sort of sales that have some level of numerical outcome tied to it. I mean, what do I mean by that? Let's say like revenue, you're helping them make money or you're helping them lose weight, right? There's like a number tied to it, right? Or even the thing that you're helping them do has numbers involved, right? So maybe you're helping them save on taxes. So you're going to need to understand like their income. You need to understand their targets, XYZ. Whenever you're doing that, whenever you're selling something fixed like that, I always like to reserve the beginning of the call to get their numbers out of the way first. Okay, so I reserve the very beginning of the call and I'm really showing up like a doctor. I almost like have a notepad like I'm a doctor. I've got my glasses out the edge of my nose and I'm asking these very like straightforward and simple questions without hesitating or without framing or dancing around it. You want to get their numbers directly from them. You cannot shy away from it. When I just started in sales, I really would like push it down the line, right? Like when I started in sales, I was selling a wholesaling mentorship. So I was helping people. This was probably the third product that I'd sold for, but it was a mentorship to help people wholesale real estate. And I would always, at the beginning, when I was just getting started, I would always kick it down the road as to asking them things like their income, things like their target income, things like how much do they have to invest, their credit score. I would always kick it down the road to the end of the call. And then I would always like dance around it and frame the questions to make it not invasive. And none of that works. The reality is when you've got these kinds of important qualifying questions, I like to do it early. Maybe not right away, obviously, but not during the product, after the product. I like to do it before the product pitch at some point in the discovery phase. And I like to be very matter of fact about it. Okay. So let's say you're selling to a business and you help that business make more money or you help that business get more leads so they can make more money very easily. Okay. And I just have to ask you a couple of quick questions about your business just to make sure that I'm even pointing in the right direction in the first place. So really quick, what was the revenue last month? Okay, they tell you the revenue. Okay, and how many leads did you get in the last 30 days? Okay, and how many booked calls did you get? And so you're asking them this really like a doctor would, and then actually write them down so you can use that in your product pitch later. When you're pitching the product, you can use their numbers to them. And then the reality is when you start pitching your product and you start pitching your solution and it's levels above what they're currently doing, they cannot deny their own numbers. It's what they told you, right? So I help people with sales. So when I get on the call and I start asking them, what's your speed to lead? Most of them don't know it, which creates a lot of like authority right out the gate because they don't know the numbers that I'm asking them. And then I show them a dashboard of how we track that for our clients. And I'm like, oh my God, we don't even track that. It creates a big status gap, but that's besides the point. Or I ask them their revenue, I ask them their close rates, their speed to lead, their show rates. And then I start showing them examples of, well, these are what we do. These are the show rates that we get. They cannot deny that these are their numbers and this is where they at and that we will help them bring them to XYZ. They cannot now go back and say, well, we don't need this. You obviously need it. You just told me your numbers. I could help you double it or triple it or whatever the solution does. Don't make your best selling point the focus. This is one of my favorite ones, and this is one of the favorite things that I do on sales calls is when I'm selling a product and I've got a really, really powerful selling point of that product or like a really powerful statement or case study, I love not making it the focus of my point whenever I'm bringing it up. So what do I mean by that? If I have a prospect and I just tell them, hey, you know that we've helped over 100 people, or actually I'll use our real example as net revenue. Hey, you know that we've helped 8 businesses get to $1 million per month? And then I just put the ball back in their court. It's not believable. And it feels like I need their validation. It will not get the point across the same as if I use that as an aside. So I kind of brush it off. And this is something that Oren Klaff talks about a lot. I believe he calls it a status tip-off. So it's when you want to create a tip-off of status, of that you have a higher status than the person you're speaking to, you need to like sprinkle in these points that are so valuable and that allude to a higher status without making them the focus because you don't need their approval in the first place. And it's so much more believable when you do that. So in our case, I would do something like, now, obviously, Scott, we've helped over 8 businesses get to $1 million a month at this point. And what we noticed when doing that is they all had one major thing in common. They all had one thing that they could say they were the best in the world at. I guess in your case, what is that? What is the thing that you're the best in the world at? And I say it and I ask the question in a way where obviously we've helped 8 businesses get to $1 million a month. That's not the point. The point is, here's my question. And then I put the ball back in their court. And now just subconsciously it creates this status tip off where they're like, whoa, these guys are for real. They've not only helped 8 businesses get to $1 million a month, but it's not even the main point of what he's telling me right now. So if you start to think about, well, what are some really powerful case studies that you have, and then use it in the framing of a question. So I'm using that because, all those 8 businesses, they had something in common, and I'm framing my question with it. It works so well. And people are going to start to lean in. They're going to start to answer your questions with more detail. When you speak, they're going to listen. They're not going to cut you off because all of a sudden you have status and they believe it because you didn't need their belief in the first place. The thing holding them back is probably the exact thing that they need to push them forward. This one, I know I said the last one was one of my favorites. This one is one of my favorites to do on sales calls. So many people kind of try to wrap their heads around how to handle these objections or these obstacles, or when a prospect says that they don't have money, or when a prospect, even in the discovery phase, maybe it's not an objection, but they're saying in the discovery phase they don't have money or they don't have time. You ask them why they haven't started yet or why they are only doing this now, and they give up all these problems, they potentially real problems that could be holding them back from doing the thing that you sell. So many people get so caught up in that and they try to figure out the best way to handle it and the best way to say it. The reality is sometimes the easiest way to handle any real obstacle that your prospect is giving you is just by throwing it back on them and saying something like, and that's the exact reason why you need to do this now. Asking them a question where they have to answer it in that way, or even just saying it back to them, is often the best way to handle that, especially in the objection handling phase. They give you an objection, well, I just don't have enough money, I don't have enough time, XYZ. I mean, listen, Scott, isn't that the exact reason why you do need to do this now? And you tilt your head and you ask in the curious tonality, you'd be surprised how many people are just going to be like, yeah, you're right. That is the reason I need to do this now. Another way you can do that, again, I don't always want to tell them. I want them to tell me, right? In that case, I am telling them a little bit. It still works, but even better is I want them to tell me. When they bring up XYZ problem or obstacle, instead of telling them, I ask them. And I mean, Scott, first of all, I just want to commend you because most people, and I always like to identify, make these identity buckets, right? Even you could identify and label someone into who you want them to be and the ideal buyer. You could also label the opposite, right? The anti-buyer, the person who's never going to buy, and you can antagonize that label or that identity rather. That was something I learned from Eli Wild. So most people, when they are in your situation and they can barely make ends meet and they're working 8 hours a week and they have no time, most of them just throw in the towel or they kick it down the road or they make XYZ excuse. But I just want to commend you, Scott, because it doesn't seem like you've come on this call to make excuses today, right? And then you label them in a way where they're not going to give you that problem in the first place, similar to what I talked about before. And then I might just ask them, all of that aside, being that you had these problems, what made you want to do it anyways today? What made you want to jump on this call regardless, right? A really good example when this works really well is when people say they got burned before, right? So let's say you sell taxes and they're like, well, I just got burned by my last CPA. Well, hey, Scott, first of all, I just want to commend you because, most people just kind of kick it down the road and then they just don't find a solution that works for them. They try to do it themselves and they waste time, money, effort. But in your case, you've gotten burned before, you're already jumping in a call. What's made you already want to look for another solution instead of just throwing the towel in altogether, right? And then the only way for them to answer that question is to start to agree that they want this solution and that they're looking for this solution. So you can do this for most of the obstacles and objections that they give you, especially when they give it to you in the objection handling or in the discovery phase. You just loop it back, you can label it, you throw it back to them, and that is the exact reason that they won't need to do this in the first place. You either lead the call from the beginning or the prospect does. This one is really simple, and for new sales reps, it is one of the things they struggle with the most. So super important at the beginning of your sales calls, you need to set the agenda of the call. You need to set the parameters and the box that prospect is going to live in during that call. If you're more advanced and you've gotten much better at psychology and you've gotten much better at like the things I was talking about before, the status tip-offs, framing your questions in ways ways where people just align with your status and they follow your lead, then great. You probably can skip setting the call. But most beginners should be setting their calls. Set the agenda. Hey, today's call is for XYZ reasons. We're going to cover XYZ topics, and then I'm going to help you with X, right? So I'm showing them what the path is, and then I'm walking them down the path. That is the easiest way to gain some basic level of authority and status in your sales calls so that the prospect can start to follow your lead. If you do not do that and you're lacking the skills to do it later with your questions and with your framing, then you will only close the people that came on to buy in the first place. You just won't close that other 60% of people that come on needing a real closer to close them. The best way to deliver something with abrasiveness is to sandwich it in positiveness, in compliments. So what do I mean by this one? This, especially when you're negotiating, is very important. Now, as a closer, you probably don't spend a ton of time negotiating, but it still does happen, especially when you are newer, where people are negotiating on price, and maybe you do have leeway on price, or you have leeway on certain other additives in your service or product that you're selling. Or if you're a buyer and you're like buying a car, or you're booking a hotel room, or whatever you're buying a house, you're going to be negotiating, right? But when you're a closer, when you're a seller, you probably don't negotiate a ton, just maybe at the end of your calls. This specifically, when you are negotiating, is one of the best things that you can do, which is when you need to deliver some level of abrasiveness or bad news or tell someone no, basically like you can't do XYZ, I always sandwich it in like compliments or positiveness. So for example, if I'm a closer and someone's asking me for a discount, and they're saying, hey, I just want $1,000 off, and then I'll do this today. Before I say no, I'll just start by, well, hey, first, Scott, I just want to commend you. This has been a phenomenal call. You've done really, really well. I take like 8 of these calls a day, by the way, and we turn away like 80% of the people we speak to. So the fact that we made it this far, and I really want to see you crush it. I really want to see you win. I'm very excited for that. However, when it comes to the price, and then I turn them down, right? So no, I start it with a compliment, and then I release the bad news. And again, so many people are just going to be okay with it and then move on and then great. Same thing when I'm the buyer, right? When I'm negotiating and I'm buying something, before I ask them for that discount or ask them for an extra room or a room upgrade, I'm always like, hey, by the way, you've been doing incredible so far. I really appreciate how you step up and help the people here. It's amazing. But XYZ, and then you ask them for that upgrade. So when you have to deliver some sort of like, again, it might be known as abrasiveness. I don't think it is. I think negotiating is just part of business, but a lot of people do think negotiating is abrasive. Then I always like to deliver it very positively around positive things. People think that when you negotiate, you have to get really stern, and they picture like haggling, and they picture like at markets when you're screaming at the guy to get a cheaper price. That is not how you want to do it. If you label people and you use positive interactions and you make people feel good, they're way more likely to do the thing that you're asking them to do. People won't remember you, they'll remember how you made them feel. When you're starting out as a closer, and when you're taking, actually all closers, this is for everybody, not just beginners, everybody. Most people load their sales calls with stats, with percentages, with case studies, with all of these things, and very number oriented and result oriented, which is good. There's definitely a place for it in sales. But what you should do is you need to load your calls with helping your prospects step into their future selves and helping them feel it and helping them feel like it's real and helping them undergo this early part of a transformation. This is called identity selling, is what a lot of people call it. And it's, again, when you're helping your prospect create this future identity of themselves, which also happens to be the identity of the buyer that you're trying to sell to, and you're helping them step into that identity with your labels, with your tonality, with your questions that you're asking, and with the responses that you're inciting from the prospect. So when you do this on your calls, and it's a lot of what we've already spoken about on this call, but on this video. But when you do this and you help that person undergo the early parts of that transformation, they will remember how you made them feel far more than what you told them, right? Or what the stat was. How many people have you sold and you told them XYZ deliverables and they come back a month later and are like, you promised this thing. And you're like, no, I didn't. I never promised that. And they just made it up. They thought you said that, right? Versus when you make them feel a certain way and you make them transform and undergo this certain identity, that sticks with them a lot more. And then not only are you going to close more people, you will have better customers. You will have less refunds, less complaints, better reviews as a result. Be your prospect's mirror. So I've talked about this a lot already, but when you're on a sales call with the prospect, you need to hold the mirror up to them for that future self of themselves, or sometimes not just their future self, but you need to hold the mirror up of their current state so they can see how far they are from their goals, from their future self. The best way to do that is with labeling. That is the best way to do it. Again, I've talked about labeling already. If you want a whole masterclass on it, just look up Chris Voss, look up labeling, never split the difference. But labeling is responding back to your prospect with it sounds like, it seems like, or it feels like. Usually when you're labeling, you're not labeling what the prospect told you, but you're labeling between the lines, right? So if I'm a prospect and I told you, hey, I work 80 hours a week, maybe the product you're selling is you help someone start a business, right? So, hey, I'm a nurse. I work 80 hours a week. I haven't even been able to put my kid to bed for the last 3 nights. So if I label and I say, it sounds like you're a nurse and you haven't put your kid to bed for the last 3 nights. That's fine, right? That's like me actually holding up the mirror, just saying back what they said. Versus I label the implied. I label between the lines. I mean, hey, it sounds like you're sacrificing so much at this job that you can't even show up as the mother you want to, right? Or as the mother that you know you want to be or need to be. And I label that level deeper from what they said. They said this here at this line, and I've labeled the feeling. I've labeled how not just what they said, but their real situation. And now I've held up the mirror to them and showed them the truth about their situation. Because they might be lying to themselves. They might be like, yeah, I don't really have a choice, but I work like 80 hours a week. And, because of that, like the sitter has put the kids to bed most nights, right? And they might be kind of brushing it off and not really acknowledging the truth. Like, hey, it sounds like you've had to sacrifice so much to this job. You're giving so much to this 9 to 5, or in your case, 9 to 9, that you're not able to show up as the parent that you want to be. Am I missing something there, right? And you start labeling them this way and you hold up that mirror, you will have much, much more impactful conversations, and people are going to start to move buildings to buy your product to solve that problem, because the problem has just gotten so much bigger. Remember I said before, running towards something or running away from something. When you label people in this way, that's how you make the thing they're running away from bigger, which sometimes is exactly what you have to do to get someone to buy. Don't sell the outcome, sell the problem that comes up after the outcome. Okay, so this is the last one we'll touch on today, and it is one of my favorites, last but not least, for sure. When you're selling something, when you're selling a product, you should always have a part of your product that is involved or that you sell. Maybe it's an upsell, maybe you're not selling it right away, but there should always be a part that solves the problem that they would only have once they solved that first thing. So I'll stop being really complicated and I'll simplify this. Let's say you're selling real estate coaching, right? Net revenue, we sold a lot of real estate coaching. We've sold, without exaggeration, probably over $100 million in just real estate coaching alone across the 12 real estate coaches we worked for 5 years plus. We made all of the real estate coaches that we sold for, we forced all of them to offer a tax planning and saving portion to their program, whether it was through a coaching call or through course or through an actual partner that did it for them. Why? Because when I'm the closer and I say, hey, part 1 is we help you get the deal, right? Part 1 is we help you get the property. Part 2 is we help you get the financing for the property and close it. And then part 3 is we help you save money on taxes, because when you start making $150,000 a year in real estate, we don't want you giving half of it to the government. When you add that as part of your program, the results and the accomplishment of the solution, the results, become so much more real to the prospect. And you could have the best case studies in the world, but when you add this, it does much more than case studies does, because they're already starting to see these guys are so confident in solving my first problem, they're already solving the next problem. It's assumed that I'm going to earn XYZ in real estate, and then I'm going to have a problem paying taxes, so I'm going to need them for help on the taxes. It's so smart. And it's kind of like what I said before, when you don't want to sell the thing and make it the focus, right? You take the thing and you make it an aside point, and then the focus is your question. It's a very similar thing here, where you're selling your product, but then there's a portion of your product that is solving something that they would only need if they got results. And it's so powerful when you add that. So just think about, what is the thing that I'm selling? What is the outcome? And then assume the prospect gets that outcome. What are the next problems they're going to have? And then can I add that as part of my program? Maybe you need to add it at an extra price, and that's okay. You can still use it and say, hey, the third part of the program is we'll help you with your taxes. You'll only need this later, so there is an added cost. I'll discount that from you right now, so you're not paying it right now, but you will need it in about 3 months, and it's XYZ, XYZ, right? So whatever the price is. So you can still do that, and you can still use the power of it even though you're charging more money for it then. But I would just recommend bundling it and just selling more up front. I always prefer selling things up front. So that is the last point. The last brutal truth that I'll share with you guys is add a portion of your program that solves the next problem that your successful version of your prospect will have as a result of buying your thing. So these were some of the brutal truths that I've picked up along the way of selling millions of dollars personally when I was closing, and being responsible for my sales team selling over $300 million of revenue across hundreds of companies. If you like this video, please like, subscribe, comment. It really helps. I'm gonna keep doing this every single week. It is Saturday night on the 4th of July at 10 p.m. and I'm putting my absolute best foot forward to get real content for business owners and closers out there that need it. Now, before you go, if you wanna learn the systems that the top 1% of closers are using to sell more, click this video, watch this video next. I cover the entire thing from A to Z.